would suggest if we take 15 minutes to hear some questions or comments. Try and keep your questions short. If you're making a statement, that's all right, but don't go on too long because I will shut you up. And as I said at the beginning, please just say who you are. We find that helpful in our diminishing mental capacities. Thank you. Okay. Question? Yes.
Hi there. Alan Smith, a member of the European Parliament. Following in noble footsteps, Mark. Not as much as you, sadly. I would very much commend the speeches tonight, and I pick up on Robin's point particularly about the multilateral layers of government. I mean, I'm sitting in the European Parliament, and the amount of times where we are told by the European Commission, it's a WTO rule, there's nothing we can do. And I'll let you all into a secret, we do it here as well, that if you want to really suck the oxygen out of a room, just say it's an EU rule, there's nothing you can do, Minister. And everybody loses the will to live. So that, to me, is exactly what we're talking about. Getting the powers back in Scotland so that we can actually put people back in charge of their lives and have transparency about where all the rules that we're living to are coming from. But can I caution you, having praised that point very strongly, can I caution you about the references to Catalonia, Flanders and the rest of them? Everybody has their own demos and everybody has their own stuff. And the more we mix other people's stuff with ours, the more we risk contaminating our own debate. And I'm very close, and I'll bow to nobody in my enthusiasm for democracy in other places, but the Catalans have got their stuff with Madrid, and we're going to have to persuade the other member states of the European Union to accept our process and not get into it. And that has been an achievement in itself, the extent to which we've not had interference in our discussion domestically by other people who are minded to cause us problems so that we don't cause them problems. So the idea also that we're all going to march in unison towards it, and I think smaller states do democracy better, full stop. But the extent to which we should be wary about linking our stuff to other people's, I think is something that we must be very conscious of in this room, where we're all voting for independence, I suspect. There's lots of people in Scotland we need to persuade, and there's lots of people outside of Scotland who want to stop it.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm just going to invite similar kinds of comments. I don't want this to turn into a kind of question and answer on voting any questions for us. We'll give the panel the last word soon, but are there other contributions people want to make? Yes?
I'm interested in what Robin or any members think of where the unions are at the moment. I think Grangehouse issue showed us that certainly they were so involved in their own internal problems that they lost the plot against this multinational corporation which nobody has any control over at all, and they've lost the ability to properly work for their members. What are they going to develop in an independent Scotland? Who sees that happening?
I think Bob Crew's still working with members.
I'm not going to defend a single person or blame a single person. It is the biggest picture.
Well, I'm sure Robin's got plenty to say about this and knows more about it than me, but I'm a passionate trade unionist, and I belong to a trade union, the National Union of Journalists, which is on a sticky wicket these days with the economic underpinnings of our industry, but nonetheless does a tremendous job in areas such as Levison, for instance, of working out policy that really pays some respect to journalistic values. And interestingly, the National Union of Journalists never missed a beat when Ireland became independent in 1921. It just continued organising across the UK and Ireland and bashed on, and I strongly trust that my union would do that. I think trade unionism, to be effective in the modern world, has to be international. I think one of the things that has been revealed by the Grangemouth dispute is not only whatever internal shortcomings there are in the way Unite works or in their realistic assessment of the situation they were in, and there may be some, but the two things that were really revealed to me was, one, that there are people in the Labour Party, a party I used to vote for, whose main aim in dealing with a dispute like Grangemouth seems to be to have a go at Unite when they're not having a go at Alex Salmond, rather than to actually consider the position of those workers and what can be done in the long term to make sure that people don't face that kind of horrific, experience. And secondly, the colossal power, as I said in my column last week, that one man had over a huge chunk, 1% or whatever it is, of the Scottish economy. Clearly unacceptable, I would say, and abnormal in European terms. I mean, there are very few other European countries that have sole private ownership of major energy resources. So, I mean, we really need to wake up and smell the coffee. I mean, the amount of neoliberal rubbish that the British electorate, all of it, including a lot of Scots, have internalised over the last 30 years about how you can't have public ownership and it's always inefficient and it's never a viable policy option. It's just ridiculous in terms of international European comparisons. And we really need to shift the ground of debate, and we can't do that if we vote no, I'm afraid.
Okay.
Just quickly, can I say to Owen,
Listen, all we've got to do is for them to say to the EU, oh well, stuff it then, if they say you can't do it. Who says? Because they're in a state of flux, and there aren't the people standing up to them. I'd be quite willing to do it.
Okay, here we are. Yeah.
My name's Stuart Swanson. I stay in what used to be Adam Ferguson's house in Sheens, and Adam Ferguson, who served with the government side at Culloden, was his life. I'm sure Joyce, McMillan's got a few things in common with his view of Scottishness and Britishness. But 2 points. One to do with Radical Scotland, and Andy will remember the interview with Malcolm Rifkin about mandate, where Rifkin said, well, if Scotland voted 37, 38 SNP MPs and they agreed to meet in Stirling, he would go there, in his taxi load of colleagues or others. And not that I'll lose any sleep over it, but I was wondering, would Liberals and Conservatives be happier in an independent Scotland than with what they've got just now? Because obviously there must be Conservatives in Sweden, Denmark, throughout Scandinavia.
happens with the bread butter on both sides, so don't worry about that. It'll take care of itself once you get yes.
No, so
Sorry, I think you had a second one. Did you ever see your...
the other point was to do with the Radical Scotland point, and it was almost like the Plan B. If Westminster is sovereign, then if we have 35 odd, if there will undoubtedly be events post-referendum if it was a no, and if there will be events, and there may be a subsequent Westminster election where a majority of SNP MPs are elected. I think we should just be aware that there are two ways of going about this. We can have the referendum, but we could have voted for 40 SNP MPs before the referendum and would have got the result anyway.
James McKenzie, Prime Member. Robert made a staunch defence of the idea that nationalism means you agree there should be a nation state, which is perhaps a broader definition than most people would recognise. I think there's a danger here. If we want to win this vote, as I do and as the panel do, we need to appeal to people who don't regard themselves as nationalists, who don't identify as nationalists. I don't identify as a nationalist at all. I have no interest in flags. I have no interest in all this kind of guff, from my mind, that comes with it. I passionately want to see an independent Scotland. I am a non-nationalist for independence, and left-wing nationalists are my closest allies on the political spectrum, but I am not one of them, and we will not win over those Labour voters by telling them a yes vote is a nationalist vote. We'll win it over by telling them a yes vote is a vote for the Spirit 45 and a vote for all the things that they want to see, which they can't achieve at Westminster, and it's a vote against Westminster itself as a corrupt and...
Did you like Sunshine and Leaf?
Musical, Margo.
Well, you've got problems. Go to see that and you'll understand the spirit of Scotland. And it's not chauvinistic, it's not...
So if you want to win, we need to appeal to non-nationalists.
Can I pick up a couple of these points? Because it's possibly worth me just pointing out. I thought since it was you lot, I'd come and do something a bit pointy-headed, a bit theoretical. I'm 4 nights a week in town halls in Scotland, and we're having these conversations in great depth about the idea of Commonweal, about a vision for a different Scotland, about the model for it, what it looks like, what it means to them, what it doesn't mean to them. We're developing an entire phraseology around this. Get it in your diaries, folks. We booked the Archies for the 8th of December for a launch party for those that like a bit of music and some fun. We're trying to make this a popular campaign. We have writers who are writing vision statements about what this would mean for people in the future that will go on t-shirts. We're going to have t-shirts with the messages. We're going to have, we've got 6 artists who are going to do a vision of a drawing of what it would mean to live in this society. We're going to have the posters for sale on the wall. We're going to make stencils so people can legally stencil images across the place. The brief for the ID says you should be able to spray it in 30 seconds when the cops aren't looking at will deny that. We know this. This is how we're talking, and this is how we're developing, and it comes back to 2 of the other questions, which is Lib Dems and Conservatives, and what's their relationship. Let's not worry about it too much just now, because if I'm going to put my strategy hat back on, I'm involved in a whole load of things around about this. I know people who are canvassing the high flats and the Gorbals and getting 70% return rate. I know another group of people who did extensive canvassing, I think it was Easter House over 2 weekends, 4 of them, and they didn't get a confirmed no in 2 weekends. What we have to understand here is the dynamic of this. There is no such thing as a Labour voter anymore. But that's because there is no such thing as strong party identifier. Nobody is now born into a party identification that they last their whole life. So these are the people that we've got to talk to. And what we're trying to do is develop language they can understand. People don't understand neoliberal versus social democrat. They don't even understand Nordic versus what we have. So what we're trying to do is create a language for this. And you will find that our new tagline is to try and set these 2 things apart. We're trying to explain the difference between me first politics and all of us first politics. Now this ain't, we've got the domain name, and I think it's very interesting that when we went to try and get the domain name all of us first, not a single one of them were taken. Globally, nobody in the whole world thought the words all of us first .anything were worth buying. So we've got this message. We've got this message now about all of these things, and it's how we're going to develop it. I thought I'd just do something slightly different here. And the same thing is true of the unions. People think that the unions are taking a position of no position for the reason that they want to be able to oppose independence. I can tell you categorically that the big unions are taking a position of no position because they're reasonably confident there's a very good chance they would lose if they allow a democratic vote within their unions. Now, this is particularly true with the big 2 unions and Unite, but I must tell you, I've been talking to a lot of Unite people in the last couple of weeks, and they ain't becoming more unionist. In fact, they are rapidly going in the other direction. So, absolutely, I just want to differentiate what I might come and say in the new college of Edinburgh University versus what we're talking in the outside world. And just to pick up the point, I know we're not supposed to speak the Spanish, definitely not in unison. We will become social democratic utopias in sequence, but I do have a strategy. Which is, why don't we just offer Spain our 9% of Gibraltar back as a sweetener?
One more, yeah.
I'm local, I'm not in yes, just what Robin was saying there, really, we're going out to places that people aren't registered to vote. And these aren't apathetic people, these are disillusioned. They are the grandchildren of the 45 settlers who have been discarded. And we too are getting anything from 60 to 100%. The thing is, you've got to go out with your voter registration forms because so many of them aren't on the electoral register. And if, God forbid, there was a no vote next year, we could turn this place upside down because there are lots of seats where the majority isn't as many as the no turnouts. I mean, I don't think we will. When we get into areas like this, I don't think the no vote would win. But even if they do, all bets are off afterwards. There's no such thing as a safe seat.
And it's not the spirit of 45 that wins this.
Yeah.
Genuinely, what wins this is the spirit of 50. I am talking in working class communities all over Scotland, and we just describe to them what Commonwealth Scotland would look like for them. We describe what would happen after independence, how we would get there, and how we would fight our way through to creating that. And people are just standing up and saying, why has nobody told us this before? And if we can get that across, we will win this. And incidentally, on your point of voter registration, and I'm afraid my friends from Yes Scotland have left, but I swear to God, and I'm not kidding, I'm a air campaign political strategist. I know ground campaign political strategists. we would do so well to have perhaps a few less branded goods for sale, and just to book every bus in Scotland for the 18th of November. And I'm going to Cumney, and I'm so looking forward to it. And I'm going to say to the people of Cumney, if you can just knock doors and bring your friends out, you, working class people from Cumney, can break up the British state. What a joy, what a pleasure, what an achievement, what a thing. I genuinely sometimes I lie in bed at night and I can't sleep. The thought, the working class people of Cumney,
Okay, thanks, Steve. I'm Roger Mullen. I thought I would just mention Stephen Maxwell for a change. In 1974, just after I failed to unionise IBM, I came to study at Edinburgh University. And Stephen took me in for 6 months because things were a bit tight. And indeed in those days is when I met Owen and Dave and others. And I used to sit in Stephen's flat of an evening for about those 6 months, and every night we were having arguments. We were both on the same side, but we were always having arguments. And I think that's what's begun to spin out this evening. And I think that's one of the great things we need to recapture. One of the things that the No campaign, I think, has been successful on is to keep on saying, asking questions as if there is an answer, the answer. What there is a debate. There is a liberating debate to be had, and that's different from some mechanistic answer. And if I pick up on one thing that Owen says when he was talking about canon and not debating, I remember in 1974 I was a candidate against Margo's husband in South Ayrshire.
He's forgiven you.
And I challenged your man to a debate throughout the constituency, but of course he was always too fierce. And because he was too fierce, and I remember saying to Owen, you know, this man Silversdale will no debate with me, and he said, well, you should bring back the Irish tradition and have an empty chair debate. Which I did. And perhaps that's what Alex Salmon should have, an empty chair debate.
Listen, can I say one more thing? Say how much I appreciate just the memories you've invoked here. This business about getting 70% return, 80% return, great, fantastic. But if you went up to Firhill High School, or you went to any of the high schools that are covering middle and working class communities, you would find the 16 and 17-year-olds are saying no. Now what I'm afraid of is, if they say no just now and they're militant at all about it, and they will become so, because it becomes a fashion, then we'll find it awful hard to persuade them away from it. And I think I just enter that as a note of caution.
I think that's a worthwhile note.
Okay, I want to bring it to a close, but Owen wants a second.
Which is thanking Roger Mullen very much, and to say, yes, that's the message we have to take from this meeting. Stephen Maxwell gave us that primer for independence in arguing for independence. People have been saying that they're confused, they don't know what's happened, they don't know what the issues are. Let everybody who is in favour of independence read Arguing for Independence and be ready to put forward his conclusions, to lend the book, to persuade people to buy it, but simply to argue from it and argue further from this one. So Stephen must be the watchword that we take from this meeting and put his ideas into practice, talk them as much as we can, and make them our means of victory.